Hi everyone. Welcome to our next edition of STEM Talk. I'm Whitney Dove.
And I'm Amanda McGee. Tonight we will be talking about a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts.
Yes, we both absolutely loved our time in the classroom as classroom science teachers, but now we're both out of that role. We've moved on and, we've had some time to reflect on things, and we'd like to share with you some of our biggest regrets and things that maybe we would do differently next time around.
Yes, one of the things that made the biggest difference for me was my time as a science instructional coach and the secondary science coordinator. I was able to learn so much just from observing other teachers and spending time outside of my own classroom and reflecting on things that were going on in my classroom.
So before we get too deep into this, we are going to have a little fun.
Absolutely. We've got some really cool prizes to give away tonight. Throughout the whole broadcast, we'll be giving away prizes.
So you want to tell them about our challenge?
Oh yeah, so we had at CAS this year, if you were there, STEMcoach booth ran an awesome CSI STEMfail. We asked you to help us figure out who printed those horrible worksheets.
Oh my goodness.
And so we will be tonight giving out prizes for everyone that helped us throughout the STEMfail. Everyone will get something, and at the very end, we are doing a big prize.
Yes. There will be a $100 grand prize at the end of the broadcast, so make sure you stay tuned to find out who gets that. First of all, though, we are going to give away 3 STEMcoach t-shirts.
These are hot items.
These are super cool. We designed them. I shouldn't say we, some of our fabulous workers that are fancy and can draw things, they designed them. And they're a hot item because there's only about 30 of these in existence. So we are excited to give a couple of those away. And those are going to go to
Tina Frazier, Shelly Baxter, and Ryan Burkett.
Yay,
guys! Thank y'all so much for helping us.
Yes, we did. We had a really good time at CAST meeting all of the teachers who were eager to find out who the culprit was. And yes, okay, the culprit was me.
Not really. I'm pretty sure I printed that worksheet before in my career.
True enough.
So here at STEMcoach, we have divided our professional development into 5 kind of big, broad categories. We have lots of little bitty subcategories that you can go in and learn about. But over our next couple months, we're going to be doing kind of a series where we go through each one of those broad categories. And Whitney and I are going to confess to some of the not so great things we did as teachers in our own classrooms.
Absolutely. But we want to remind you too that we have tons of resources available to you at any time on STEMcoach.com, and those will align to any of these 5 domains.
Absolutely. There's great stuff on there. The first category we're going to talk about is curriculum development. This is a great topic.
Yes, a huge topic. It's going to encompass lots of different ideas. Some of those topics are standards dissection, backwards design, development of inquiry science lessons, addressing common misconceptions, and my favorite, assessment.
The next category is instructional strategies. These include just those best strategies to use in the classroom, things like good questioning practices, literacy and vocabulary development, discourse and argumentation in that science classroom, and one of my favorites, the use of science notebooks.
Yes. And we also have a really cool category, cutting edge type stuff, called STEM learning practices. Within that category, we'll be discussing things like problem-based learning, integration of technology, engineering practices, and the claim evidence reasoning model.
Awesome, and we do already have another STEM talk about the CER stuff on there. Another category that's probably very interesting to teachers nowadays is the inquiry in science category. This is where we are providing resources to help teachers with student-centered inquiry, moving some of those labs from more cookbooky to inquiry labs, sustained inquiry, and even that student independence for students.
Yes, but for today, our focus is on the classroom environment. We will be covering some really important points, things like relationships between the student and the teacher, cooperative learning and the importance of that, and even more so the physical environment, a topic that we don't always discuss but is definitely worth addressing.
Absolutely. But before we get really deep into that, let's give away some more stuff. Yay. So our next prize is going to be this great book that we are actually doing a book study right now on. It is called Switch. And these books are going to go to Christina Egbert-Skeen and Chad Haskins.
Yay! Those guys are really going to love that book. We've really had some great discussions within our team, and we're finding that it's very helpful. And so I'm excited for you guys to get that copy and get to work with that. And feel free to dialogue with us too as you read through it, because we've been having some really cool discussions.
Yeah, it's about how to change when change gets hard. So what we're talking about today is reflecting on some of those things in your classroom and then really kind of getting through and changing them if you can. So it's a really good book. Even if you didn't win it, you could check it out.
Yep, you can still check it out. Okay, so today we're going to talk about student-teacher relationships, and we want to take a minute just to clarify what we mean when we say student-teacher relationships.
Absolutely. A very strong student-teacher relationship is when there is a high level of mutual respect in the classroom. Working to build strong relationships creates a sense of safety within the classroom. Feeling safe is important when you are encouraging students to show their misconceptions, work in groups, and grow in their science knowledge. When students have a good relationship with their teacher, they are less likely to be afraid of making mistakes and giving incorrect answers. Students become happy, confident learners when they know that the teacher believes in them and is just trying to help them grow and get better. I also think that we can say that there's a lot more motivation behind students whenever they have that relationship with their teacher to do better when if they know the teacher wants them to do better, they do better.
Right, and another thing to think about too is that we are modeling for our students the kinds of relationships we want them to have with adults outside of a classroom and also with each other.
Absolutely. One of my teacher mentors very early on used to tell me that we're not just teaching science, we're teaching kids either how to do school or how to interact with their world around them. So it's really important that we model those things for them. I think it's also important for us to not forget that kids still want the same things that we want. Like, think about the job that you work with. You want to work with a boss that you have a great relationship with, that you feel comfortable admitting mistakes and showing, will help you grow and get better. Those are the exact same things that kids want.
Yeah, that's great advice. Good things to remember. So we need to think about several important parts of the student-teacher relationship.
These important parts are really getting to know your students, having some of that individualization, not doing everything for everyone, watching what you say, and very importantly, how you say it, keep trying to reach your students, and reinforcing effort and providing recognition. Yeah.
We are going to get into our confessions here in just a minute, but before we do that, we have some more prizes to give away.
Awesome.
So the next thing we're going to give away is a couple of copies of a really important book that we've also read called Supporting Grade 5 through 8 Students in Constructing Explanations in Science.
Awesome.
This walks you through that claim evidence reasoning model that we mentioned just a minute ago. Excellent resource. To go with this, we are also sending out a couple of Rice University flash drives. So those are going to go to Gina Mendoza and Ryan Taylor.
Yay! Congratulations, guys. Okay, so we are talking about student-teacher relationships, and I am going to confess my first mistake.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so my first mistake was probably the fact that I was not always very consistent into my mood with my students. I would say that my mood in the classroom was very dependent on kind of what happened the night before. Did I get enough sleep? Had I had enough caffeine? All of those different things were important for me, and then I would treat the students different. Some days I was willing to put up with certain behavior, and then other days that same behavior would not be okay. So I know that was very hard for kids. But when I think about this, what probably bothers me the most about this was that I wasn't always the same with my kids' questions. And so there were some days where I loved the questions and I would totally encourage them and they would ask them and we would get on these topics and really we'd answer things that they wanted to know about. But then the next day when I was trying to stick to my plan, I wouldn't encourage those questions and kind of shut them down, which thinking back really makes me sad that I did that to some kids.
Yeah. I think that's a really good one. And I wonder too, because I know I did that from day to day, but I think I also probably did that a little bit from one class period to the
absolutely.
next. I would tolerate certain things in one class that maybe I wouldn't tolerate in another class. And I know that there do have to be some nuanced differences with your classroom management style, just depending on the chemistry of the room. But I don't think that was very fair either.
No.
I think I should have been more consistent throughout the school day.
Oh, I know, I absolutely did that. I would try to, but if something happened in 5th period, there's no way my 6th period did not hear about it. I know they did.
Yeah.
No, they did.
So how did students respond then?
Like, did they know? Could they tell?
Yeah, like did they ever say, Miss McGee?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was those, it was the kids that, I don't want to say the problem behaviors, but the ones that got in trouble more often, they totally would know because they would totally call me out on it. And they would say things like, oh, but you didn't get mad yesterday. And I said the exact same thing. And should have reflected a little bit more on that, but totally confessed that I did not.
Yeah. So, okay, if you had the chance to do anything different, what would you do different?
Oh, so much, so much. So I would really try to work hard on being consistent with behavior issues. I'm kind of not very controlled, and I don't really have set of things that I follow all the time, but I would go back and make myself some rules that if this happened, I would be consistent with what I did with it. The other thing as far as the question goes, because I did love those questions, and those were some of my favorite moments of a classroom teacher, was being able to talk about those things the kids wanted to talk about. I really think I would do more of, now I know about things like an inquiry wall, where if they have that question, but because of time we can't get into it right now, but they could always write that question down and put it somewhere else. I even think it would be cool to do like a Inquiry Friday where we spent 10 or 15 minutes going through those different questions they had so that I could let them know that those things were valid.
Yeah, I even saw a teacher once that had a little mailbox on the front of her desk.
Idea. Great idea.
And she would let the kids drop questions in there. And some of the questions were related specifically to her and her classroom, where they could ask about a grade, or they could ask about, can you possibly move me? I'm having a hard time staying on task here. So there were those kinds of questions, but then she also accepted other kinds of questions as well. And again, just a good strategy for valuing everything that they have to say, even if you can't make time in that actual class period for it. I think that's a really, really cool thing, and I'm glad to hear you confess that because I know I did the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I know I did the same thing. So, okay, are you ready for one of my confessions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have to confess that I was not always in check with the affective things that were going on in my classroom. I was all about content. It was easy for me to concentrate on the input and the output, content in, content out. It was really hard for me to pay attention to then, what do they look like? Do they look happy? Do they look motivated? Do they look inspired? Do they look energized? Or do they look frustrated, sad, overwhelmed, those kinds of things. And I think I really regret not paying closer attention to that.
Oh, I totally would have to say I did the same thing. And it was really hard too, is not to take those kind of things personally, to remember that they are, 5, 12, 16-year-old kids, because it was really hard. I know the first couple years that I would take those kind of things like really personal whenever they would get mad at me, but to kind of step back and reflect on that. So do you think, because I know my answer to this, but do you think having children of your own now helps you reflect on that a little bit more?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think being a mom really puts you in touch with the fact that they're just kids. They're just kids. They love their teacher, they love their classmates for the most part, and they love being at school. And it is very much a part of the teacher's job to make sure that when they are in your classroom, they feel safe, they feel loved, they feel comfortable, they feel able. These are all things that I know now that I didn't know then, that I really wish, looking back, that I would have taken my role more seriously in terms of, I want to make this a place where kids feel like they can learn, but that they can also make mistakes. I would also, you hear the phrase like, oh, I would like to be a fly on the wall. I think I would have picked out a couple of kids to watch more closely. They would have been good indicators as to how my class was affecting kids.
Absolutely. And I think that another thing about having kids of your own, it makes you realize that kids do have a life outside of your four walls of your classroom. And I think that's really important for us to kind of treat them as individual people instead of just students in that classroom during that little class period that you have them.
Right, totally.
So what would you do better if you could go back?
Yeah, if I could go back. So one thing I would do is I would make an attempt to learn the personalities of more kids. I think we we associate with kids that are like us. So I would
Right.
find a couple of kids in every class, every single year that I could associate with, that reminded me or of somebody I knew. And those were the ones that I would use as a barometer of my classroom. And, you know, for the most part, they left happy every day. But I would try to find kids that weren't like me, or kids that maybe were the quiet type. And I think I would watch them more closely, and I would think about how is their mood changing when they come into my room from the time they leave my room. Is my classroom a place where kids are leaving inspired and having more questions about the content? That's the kind of classroom I desire to have, and so I would watch that a little bit more closely.
Oh yeah, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about something that I did, but again, very inconsistently, is that I would sometimes give my kids like a semester break and end of the year, kind of a survey to kind of help me understand those things. And I would ask them things like, do you feel like, you know, I'm trying to help you learn? You know, do you feel safe? But I did, again, that would be when I felt like I had the time to do it or when it popped into my head. So more consistent things like that
Absolutely.
I would do. So first confession went well.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and do another giveaway.
Okay, very
This time
cool.
we have some more awesome STEMcoach t-shirts to give away. And these are going to Melissa Wisdom and Terry Matthews.
And let me tell you, those two ladies, they had a good time solving our CSI crime. They loved the little mystery. They loved finding the clues. So, ladies, it was fun to see you guys work through that, and it was great to meet you at CAST.
Absolutely.
So, we have a quote here for you, and we're just going to give you a few seconds to read over it. We feel it does a really good job of summarizing the importance of that student-teacher relationship, and that'll give us a second to regroup before we move on.
So we hope you enjoyed that. We're going to try to, after each kind of topic, give you like a little quote. This is all about reflecting today and thinking about things. So give you a little bit of time to reflect on your own and think about your classroom. So the next topic within our classroom environment is cooperative learning. So we're going to take a little bit of a closer look into what that means as well.
Right. So cooperative learning is a pedagogical strategy that involves small groups of students, usually just 3 to 5 members, working together to complete a task or solve a problem. Each member of a student group is individually accountable for a specific portion of the outcome. Student tasks cannot be successfully completed and implemented unless all group members work together. Cooperative learning is much more than simply assigning students to work in groups. It requires the teacher to structure his or her activities so that positive and cooperative interdependence exists within each group of students. So, you know, when done correctly, both learning and socialization can occur through cooperative grouping. But in order for it to be successful, there have to be positive student-teacher relationships in place, and there have to be positive student-to-student relationships in place.
Yes, and this is another one of those really important just life skills to teach kids that they have working together. So there are several essential elements to cooperative learning. Those are positive interdependence, individual accountability, equal participation, and simultaneous interaction.
Wow. So, Amanda, what confessions do you have for us?
Oh, about cooperative learning?
Yes, about cooperative learning.
So many. So my biggest confession is that I know I did not do cooperative learning as effective as I should have. It's hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of getting to know your kids and getting them in those groups that are the best groups they can be in. And I'm gonna be honest and say that independent time, work time, is so much easier as a teacher because you've got to have time to check up on things. So I did a lot of planning individual time and whole class instruction more than I did the cooperative learning, and I should have gone back and done more of that. I know that hands down, without a doubt.
Yeah, but you have to have some time
True.
to like check the emails and make sure you haven't missed any important announcements about a fire drill.
Very true, very
or a
true.
changed bell schedule, because that stuff's coming at you all hours of the day.
Absolutely.
So
it
if
is.
you can't do it during that time, then when are you going to do it?
So I don't think it's so much as the email stuff. I think I would still have time to do that, but I would go and check in with the teacher next door. I would, run and look at some stuff that might not have been the highest priority I should have been doing at that moment. I think that still having a really good bell ringer warm-up activity is the best way to give yourself those 2 to 5 minutes to take attendance, check those emails real quick so that you're not missing out on anything important. So I probably would structure it to where I had more time to do that. And even when you do get them in cooperative groups, and if you have those groups established that we're going to talk about later about making sure that they're working together, then you do have some time to step away and grab a couple
Right.
minutes doing some different stuff. But yeah, you could totally find time to do it into the classroom.
So if you could just change one thing about cooperative grouping, what would you change?
One thing about it, well, I would use more of it. So I kind of experimented with this more whenever I was in high school, just because I couldn't handle doing the 50 minutes of notes every day. That wore me out. So I did a little bit more of what's called like a guided center or guided station activity, to where they would kind of rotate, and although it's a lot harder to plan, you plan it once and it lasts you 2 to 3 days. So I would bring more of that back and give myself time to meet with those kids individually. So I'd have a group of 4 or 5 of them, and I would be able to change up what I talked to them about, based on the kids that were sitting in front of me. So after I did do a little bit of that, I saw the impact, and I would make sure I went back and did a whole lot more.
I actually love the idea of adding in centers and stations, even in the secondary. What's really interesting about that is that's the way we learn.
Absolutely.
We learn
Absolutely.
by doing small tasks that build up to something bigger over time. And every component of an idea is something that can be practiced through a center or a station. And everybody can be busy doing something. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but everybody can be working on something. They can rotate their way through it. And then that provides you so many opportunities for like rich dialogue that I think you're absolutely right. That's a great suggestion for bringing cooperative
And
groups
it's funny
in.
that I didn't do them more, because like I can vividly remember those days when I did do stuff in cooperative groups and I had time to have that really good dialogue with my kids. Those were the days that I love. I still remember, like, I can give you exact labs and days and things kids said to me. So it's crazy that, I would leave those days so energized and loving life and loving my job. So you would think I would have, caught on to that and done a little bit more. But again, it's hard. It's hard on the planning end, and
It is so
it's
hard.
just different.
It is hard when you're in the moment and you feel so responsible for that content.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It's so hard to turn it over. But I love that, because that goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you leave more energized and you leave feeling better about the day, then I'm sure the kids left on those
Absolutely.
days feeling better and more energized as well. So, it's funny because a lot of these things are going to kind of tie together. As you improve your student-teacher relationships and the cooperative learning in the classroom, then things overall are going to just improve. Yeah, I think that's really great advice.
So what do you have to confess?
Well, I think if I were to boil it down into, one broad category, what I would probably say is I was just careless about grouping. I did one of two things. I would either have the kids number off 1, 2, 3, 4. 1's over here, 2's over there, 3's over there. I would do that a lot.
Yep.
Or what I might do is I might have kids just choose their groups. And so that worked to some degree, but I have to tell you, I was sometimes a little bit mean about it too, because I would say things like, oh, if you choose your group, you choose your grade. Because I wanted them to understand that who you choose to work with matters. And if you choose somebody who's going to get the job done and is going to take the work seriously, then you're likely to have a better grade than if you choose somebody who you've just chosen so you guys can sit around and visit the whole time. So I think I said things like that, and I was just really careless, and I know I did not use the groups efficiently.
So how often did you even use the groups in your class? Like, how often did you get them together to work together?
I don't think in my mind, I think it was happening all the time because, like you said, those were the good days.
Yeah.
You know, those were the days where we didn't have as many behavior problems, and where the kids were all engaged, and stuff was happening, and that's really exciting. So in my mind, it was all the time. But I think if I'm really honest with myself, it was probably only once or twice per week.
Yeah.
You know, and it was probably only during, I would say, like Explore. If we were to reference the 5E learning cycle, I would say I used cooperative groups more in Explore than any other phase. Mostly, again, because like I said, I wanted to deliver the content, so I would not have used it in Explain as much. And it feels horrible saying that because I know better, but I did it anyway.
Well, it is. It's very hard to, you know what you have to get across, and it's very hard to, you know, put that trust into small groups of kids. I will say whenever I was able to do the station stuff, a lot of that was the explain piece, you know, and I would even sometimes give them choices on how they got that information. So do you want to watch this video, write me a summary? Do you want to, you know, go through the PowerPoint on your own and take notes? And but I still had to have that control, because when they got around to me in that little station, that would be where I would check and make sure they got everything they were supposed to get. So it is very hard to give up that control.
Yeah.
So if you went back, how would you do your groups and cooperative learning differently?
Yeah, I think I would get to know the kids a little bit earlier so that I would know their strengths. And then I would play to those strengths. And the idea there is that I would want to make sure that when kids were placed in groups together, that each one of them could contribute in a unique and meaningful way. That everybody had something they could feel proud of, and that they were able to contribute that to the group and make the group successful at large. Another thing I know that I would do differently is I walked into a situation where the idea for how to do groups was kind of already established. You know, we had the system by which kids from the front table would turn around to the back table, and that was a group. And then that table would go over here, and that was a group. And so that was just the way I did things. And then there were 4 roles in every group. And every time we did labs, the person in this chair was number 1, and the person in this chair was number 2. And so it was very strategic and very structured. And so you think you're doing the right thing, you know, because they tell you have a procedure, have a routine for everything. So I always felt like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. You know, they know what they're supposed to do. Everybody has a job. But what I realize now is that I missed so many opportunities for kids to change roles and responsibilities, and for them to get to experience the labs and explorations from a different perspective. So I know I would be more careful with that, and I think I would be a little bit more creative with that. And also, one thing I would do differently is I would check on the groups a different way.
Right.
I wouldn't just watch them to see that they were doing it right.
Or not fighting.
I would check to make sure that each person was doing their thing that they were supposed to do.
I think that's so important. And, you know, if we think about, again, bringing in real life and what we want to teach kids, we know that there's not many jobs out there. I mean, very, very few, if there are even any, where you are working in isolation from anybody else. Almost every job that you're going to get, no matter what you are in, is going to be you interacting with a group of people. So to help those kids actually learn their strengths early on is awesome. And I used pretty much the same scenario you did, and I would kind of have them go through and, you know, do the different roles, but I would actually have kids that would say, oh, I don't want to be the leader, or no, I don't want to be that. So to actually let them kind of do roles that work to their strengths would be so important.
And I think it's okay to listen to that. You know, if a kid can vocalize that they're not comfortable in that role, respect that.
Absolutely.
You know, that takes a lot of guts to be able to advocate for themselves like that. So if they're communicating that to you, I think an old version of myself would have said, well, too bad, you're doing it anyway. But, you know, the new and improved version of me would acknowledge that and respect it, you know, and just appreciate that kid's honesty with me.
So, are you ready to give some more stuff away?
Yes, we are. We're so ready. Okay, so we have another book.
Oh, yeah, you have it.
And this book is called The Checklist Manifesto.
It's a really good one.
Yes, it is.
So this is about getting things done. Again, making that change. How can you get it there? And so this one is going to go to our friend Brittany Coiro.
Hey, Brittany. Very cool. Another great book, Brittany. Thanks again. And let us know what you think of that book. So, okay, you know what we have not done yet?
Questions.
We have not checked in with you guys to see if you have any questions for us. So we are going to flip over and check our various sources. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to ask us questions, you can still do that because we're answering them. You can go to our Facebook page. You can send them to us on Twitter. And then also on YouTube, there's a place for you to add comments. So please keep those questions coming, and we will work them in as we move through our talk.
Or confessions too. If you want to join in and confess some stuff today, we will totally be open to that as well.
We'll all confess together. Okay.
So our first one, let's go. We have one from a Miss Bolig out in Humble, which is a really, really, really good question. And it is, you want to read it since it's on your screen?
Yes, I will read it. This is an excellent question. She says, when students perceive the learning tasks are too difficult, they tend to shut down and are reluctant to try. How does the relationship between the teacher and the students encourage students to take learning risks?
That's a really, really, really good question.
That's profound.
And so I think if we go back to one of those first things we talked about, which was that relationship between the student and the teacher, because you don't want to take a risk. If you think that you're going to get in trouble for failing or you're going to get made fun of for failing, that's scary. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that respect and you know that teacher is there to help you grow and do better, then you are more willing to try to have one of those tasks that you're not even sure you can do. But if you don't have that honest dialogue between a student and a teacher, you would never know. And then you as a teacher would probably think they're just being the bad kid and refusing to work. Might even write them up for insubordination, because they don't have that dialogue with you to let you know what's really happening.
Right. Taking learning risks requires vulnerability.
Yep.
And it requires vulnerability so that you're comfortable enough with that person to let them see you fail. And, I think back on a time when I was teaching 8th grade science and I lost my dog. It was the darkest days. The dog was gone for like 5 days. And my students picked up on that. They knew something was wrong with me. I mean, it was horrible, y'all. I did not eat for like the whole time she was gone. I cried. It was just really sad. And I remember one student in particular was so kind to me, and he asked for pictures of my dog, and he was going to take these pictures out and he was going to hang them on the trees and the stop signs around town. Mm-hmm. And it meant a lot to me to see that they were going to take care of me. They saw a weakness in me, and they responded with compassion, with great compassion. Mm-hmm. And I think by me opening myself up to them, and maybe it sounds ridiculous now, but it's just an example of I showed them my weaker side, and they took care of me, and I think that would then become a platform for those kids knowing, hey, this is a safe place. This is a safe place. She's human. She makes mistakes. She cries. She loses her dog, And
They jumped a fence, by the way. That's how the dog got out.
She jumps lots of fences. That's her thing. So yeah, I think it just creates that safety net, and when there's that vulnerability and that we're all on the same team, then it becomes easier to put yourself in that position where mistakes are likely and mistakes are probable.
I know another thing that I would teach a lot of the special ed co-taught classes, especially towards the end, because that was challenging to me, and I really liked doing that. But one of the things that I noticed is that when you get them in later grades, 7th grade, 10th grade, if they don't think they can do science, it's really hard to get that back. And so there were times I would even almost adjust assignments. The main core student objective would still be the same, but I would adjust it so that they could build that confidence up and they could feel like they were getting better. So then we would just keep challenging and moving it up. But they had to, I had to get them to that point, because immediately, and you all have kids that say it, oh, I just can't do science, or I'm not good at science. Mm-hmm. And that's because they failed so much, or they have been reluctant to try, and they haven't had a teacher that will help them get there. So I think that's really important too, is that so much of how kids perform, I think, is purely based off of them feeling confident in that subject, and being willing to try and maybe fail, and that's okay.
Yeah, and let them see your failures too. So
absolutely.
There's going to be times where you have a lesson that doesn't go the way you plan. Don't cover. Say, oh my gosh, guys, this was horrible. I messed this up.
Yep.
You know, let them see that, you know, be an equal in that environment. I think it will pay dividends.
Absolutely. So we have another question here,
Okay.
and I've got this one on my phone. This is also from a Lisa out in Humble. And so she says, Amanda and Whitney, what do you do when you have a student that does not want to even be at school and definitely does not want to be in your classroom? Another really good and tough one.
Yeah, I've had it. I've had that happen. I had a student a few years ago who had, for some reason, concocted this idea that I was a horrible tyrant and went so far as to complain to the principal that I was giving her nightmares. And every day she would come to class and she would sit in my room, and I had no idea any of this was going on because I thought she was happy as a lark. But no, she was not happy. She was having nightmares about me. So when it was brought to my attention that, you know, she didn't want to be there. She didn't quite like me. She didn't quite like my classroom, and she didn't quite think she needed to be there. When it was brought to my attention, I just wanted to cultivate that relationship with her because she had fabricated the whole thing. I promise you, there was absolutely no reason for her to have nightmares about me. I never yelled at her. She was never in trouble. She was precious. She was absolutely precious. But she, you know, just had some anxiety, and it turned into this nightmare saga. So, you know, I went to her, I spoke to her, I assured her that I did care deeply for her and I wanted her to enjoy my classroom. And, you know, we spent some time together. I think I might have had lunch with her one day in the cafeteria. We sat down together, and I asked her what her interests were, and I asked her about her family, and she opened up to me. And from that point forward, in the classroom, we were okay. And then the thing that meant the very most to me at the end of that year was that her dad came to me. And he specifically said, pretty much, I don't know what she was afraid of. She said, because you are her favorite teacher. And so, you know, it just goes to show that they do have emotions. Sometimes they don't even know why they have emotions, but we have to do our best to respond to them appropriately.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the biggest things that we've all been there, I think, with those kids, and like you said, sometimes we don't even understand why. One of the biggest things I used to do is if I was struggling with a kid, I would ask that kid, you know, who's your favorite teacher? Or I would go and try to seek the kid out and watch him in a different classroom and try to think about, you know, what does that teacher do that's totally different from me? And so why is he doing so well for that teacher? Or, you know, why does he want to be with that teacher that I'm not doing? Again, trying not to take it personally, but realizing, like that quote we showed earlier, that I am the one that kind of controls those interactions in the classroom. And so what could I do differently? And like you said, just talking to the kid. I think we so, especially when they're younger, we don't really give as much credit to their feelings as, you know, they do sometimes have crazy feelings and they have crazy hormones and things going on, but they're valid. Anything anyone ever feels is a valid feeling. So you have to, you know, talk to them and figure out what those are.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
even just having that conversation and them knowing that you are giving credit to those feelings and you're like willing to listen to them, that can go miles.
It goes a long way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or even having someone else come in and watch the interaction between you and that student. That could help too.
Yeah.
Another pair of eyes.
Another pair of eyes, and this would never hurt. Okay, so we have another question here on our Facebook page, and this one is from Kelly Smith. And the question, she said, what would be your best advice to re-energize students after the holiday break?
That's a really good one.
Well, we all know energy before the holiday break is not
It's
an
like
issue.
rock bottom. Yeah. Oh yeah, right
Yeah.
now they're way high on
Right
their
now
on
they're
their
counting
sugar
down the
rushes.
days. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think just kind of an overarching thing to think about is, you know, making sure that especially those first couple days coming back, that you do have some pretty engaging. I mean, we should always be worried about that, but making sure that those lessons are engaging and things that they're going to want to, you know, be involved in and doing. And then I used to just always, you know, call it like it is. You're not really super excited about being back either right after the holidays. So, you know, telling them, say, I know how you feel, wasn't that great break, but we're going to, you know, hit the ground running and here's what we're going to accomplish in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, that's a hard one.
It is hard. And, you know, one thing that we all do around the holidays is we all make some resolutions and we set some goals. that's a good practice. Sit down with your classes and work through some goals. Have students set individual goals, set some class goals, and make them short term. You know, you can set some long-term goals, but set some short-term goals because those are the ones that are going to motivate them the most. You're going to get the most reward for setting those goals that then you can immediately see fulfillment on.
Absolutely.
So, you know, maybe something like attendance. You know,
doing my
homework. If you're into homework, then you could do that. So there's all kinds of things you could do to set some goals, and just ask the kids, how are you doing on those goals? You know, for the first few weeks back, especially the personal ones, if maybe they didn't share them with you or they did share them, ask them about them, hold them accountable, and just let them know that, you know, we're all in this together. This is the long stretch. The spring semester is longer than the fall semester. And of course, it's filled with all kinds of crazy tests and activities, and so it's a busy one.
And again, goal setting, another one of those really important life skills that we're modeling in the classroom. Absolutely. Okay, so before we move on to our next topic, we're going to give you another quote for you to consider about the importance of letting kids work in collaborative groups and doing things together.
Okay, so for our final topic today, we're going to talk about the actual physical space, the classroom, right? Maybe the science lab, whatever you call it. We actually did have a STEM talk about a month ago that Lisa and Brandy did, and it relates to what we call the prepared environment or the physical environment. So if this is a topic that's interesting to you or you want more information, then that is archived on our STEMcoach page, so make sure you go check it out. So real quick, let's take a look at what we mean when we say the physical environment.
So our sincere hope for all classrooms is that students learn to be responsible citizens and scientists, that they become thinkers, collaborators, and explorers. Instead of looking for rules and procedures on classroom walls, we really hope that those rules are within them. We believe that a classroom environment should encourage students to make their own respectful, responsible, and safe decisions.
Right, so there are 6 main pillars in talking about the prepared environment or the physical environment, and those 6 pillars are natural beauty, order, respectful peace, rigor, accessibility, and choice. And we want to take just a quick second here too, because we feel like we need to pay homage to the fact that a lot of our philosophy here and the work that we have studied is that of Maria Montessori. So Amanda, in terms of the physical space, what do you have to confess?
Well, we're going to totally ignore the fact that my physical space was usually a complete and utter disaster and focus on
that is not surprising
some
to me.
Things that I feel like I can change after 34 years. I'm not quite sure that will ever change. But the biggest thing that I would do is, and I mean, this is true. I mean, you should get excited about getting your own classroom. You worked really hard to get that degree to have a classroom. So that was my classroom, and I would set that thing up the way I wanted to. I would make sure that my little corner with my teacher desk had all my stuff on there, had my LSU corner so I could show my purple and gold. I would pick pictures that I thought were cool, or things that, you know, I thought they should be interested in learn. So it was pretty much, you know, 100% about me. I will totally confess that there was probably not a lot of thought about them put into it. Later on, I would think about maybe accessibility to supplies, and I would make sure they had, you know, access to things. But again, I think that was more in terms of me getting annoyed because I was always having to give them stuff. So I would kind of make them a spot, but it probably could have been, you know, way better accessible to them if I would have put a little bit more thought into it, other than just what works for me.
Right. So I think it's worth saying that I think it's okay if it reflects you, because that is your home. That is your home for 8 hours a day, and you have to be comfortable there. You have to feel peace there. You know, when you have your conference period or your planning period, it has to be a place where you can, like, you know, calm your nerves and get yourself organized and that kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with infusing yourself in your classroom to some extent. You know, obviously we would not want to go crazy. you know, the kids need to be represented in that space too, because it's their home away from home too, you know. So did you ever get like upset if a kid would like rearrange things or move things? Or...
You're assuming that I would even notice if they rearranged stuff? No, I did not. So what was interesting though was my last 3 years, I was an instructional coach and I got to teach a period that was my favorite. If I could go back to that, I'd be super happy. So best of both worlds. But that was really hard because I actually floated into other teachers' classrooms, and so I didn't even really have much say in there with what the environment looked like. So that was very hard for me because they would mess with things, and it wouldn't upset me because I used to have to have kids help me keep up with stuff. Like I'd have someone track me and watch where I put the remote down because I was all over the place all the time. But that would bother my cooperating teachers that I was in their room with. So I do think that if I would have had a better procedure and a better space for them, that they wouldn't have messed with stuff as much because they would have felt like it was their own, and kids don't tend to mess things up that they feel like they have ownership in.
Yeah. So I have to say, the purple and gold is probably like a little obnoxious for those of us who have like, whoa, that's a lot of stimulus. I would have chosen like much calmer colors. Maybe even red and black.
Oh, no, red Raider.
So, for me, it's hard for me to say this, but it's totally true. I was a control freak. I still am.
Oh, shocker.
I still am a little bit. But I can remember things like, in one classroom that I had blue chairs and I had black chairs. And I really liked when I walked in the classroom to have them alternating blue, black, blue, black. But some of the kids preferred the black chairs over the blue chairs because they didn't have the holes in the back. And so I would walk in from my class after standing in the hall during passing periods, and the black chairs would be where the blue chairs are supposed to be, and the blue chairs were where the black chairs, and it made me insane. And I remember telling kids like, oh my gosh, I would never come to your house and move your furniture. Why do you think you can come into my classroom and move things around?
That's crazy. So I would never have even noticed if they were different places.
Yes,
Oh,
Lord. I know. I'm confessing that I may have guarded the materials a little bit too closely. I may have been too overbearing on some things just because I didn't want to see anything get broken. I didn't want to see it get misplaced. I sure didn't want to see it get stolen.
So do you think that some of your controlling might have even kept kids from learning some things?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, most of the things that you know how to do really well, you had to wrestle with at some point. You had to make mistakes. And I didn't want to making mistakes. I was afraid it would take too long. Again, it might break something. They might use the wrong thing, which would get the wrong thing dirty, and then I would have to clean it. And that's just a whole lot of trouble. When I can control it, then I would have wanted to just make sure that they had the right equipment, that they got the right materials, that they did the right thing, and that they got the right results. But yeah, 100%, I think if I had let them make mistakes, they would have been so much more appreciative of the experience.
Yeah, I agree. So if I could go back, I think I would talk to former students, or even like take maybe in the middle of like the 6 weeks and take a, kind of a check with them about how is this going, what could I do differently. But I do think talking to kids that, I've had before and asking them about that space, I might even let go of a little bit of the LSU and maybe put some other colleges up there. That's a big maybe though still.
Yeah.
So what would you do differently if you could go back?
Yeah, I mean, if I could go different, I think I would just pull back. I would just pull back. I would acknowledge the fact that if they break a beaker, it's not the end of the world. If the chairs get moved around, it's also not the end of the world, but I would probably ask for a set of matching chairs. Just because those things are the things that drive a person insane. I think I would be a little bit more okay with materials being in student view.
Right.
We showed you a clip earlier of a classroom that we made over. One of the things that we did that made the biggest difference is we just took the breakable
things down.
materials, the triple beams, the microscopes, and we put them in a place where the kids could see them. And then if they needed to find the volume of a liquid, they could try a couple of different containers and find out which one worked the best for them. And if they chose an Erlenmeyer flask and they found that was the wrong thing to use,
then they learned.
they learned.
And this, but I think this very much goes, because you just use the word trust. And so if we take that back to the first thing we talked about with those student-teacher relationships, that, you know, what is that telling a kid when we, and I did it, trust me, what is that telling a kid though when we don't even trust them to use a beaker or use a triple beam balance? So that, you know, when we trust them with those things, it does kind of lay that foundation and the groundwork for, you know, I do trust you to do this, and if you break it, it's okay. You know, you might not want to break it again, but that first time, you know, it's okay to make mistakes.
It's totally okay. Yeah.
So here's another quote for you to consider about your prepared or physical environment of your classroom.
Awesome. You know, I really love that quote. And a lot of us here really respect and admire the work that Maria Montessori did for education, not just primary kiddos. We're talking about secondary as well. There's a lot to be learned.
Absolutely. So, I feel so much better.
Me too.
I needed to get that off my chest.
Yes.
I'm excited. We're going to do more of these. I think it's also really important for us to do this. I mean, we were both, I taught with Whitney, Whitney taught with me. I think we'll both, you know, boost each other up a little bit and say that we were pretty good classroom teachers. But you can see with just within this little hour how many things that we did wrong that we could go back and change. I think it's really important for us to think about that stuff.
You know, when we do learn from each other, it can be through discussions like this. Another thing that we talked about a little bit earlier too is that we loved going and watching other teachers teach. You know, we learned the most about ourselves from watching others. I know that may seem, you know, counterintuitive, but it's true. It's really true. When you watch somebody else, you can't help but reflect on your own practices, and that's what helps you question them and improve them.
I mean, it's very funny because teaching is like one of the only professions that you do not do some of that. I mean, you do your student teaching, and when you're in college, you have some of those observations, but you really don't spend time studying the practice. I mean, no surgeon goes in to do their first open heart surgery without having watched multiple people who are great at doing it. So I think it's really important for us to get out there and watch people. The hard thing is if you're not an instructional coach and you don't have that time to do that, you know, when can you do it? So I know we used to suggest things like, you know, during your conference period, I know you've got work to do, take the laptop, take something and just go sit in someone else's classroom and just hear it, or sit in an empty room and open the door so you can hear your partner teacher, you know, teach, so that you can learn things about that and reflect on things that, you know, you're doing differently.
Right. Another thing to do is get that video camera out.
Yep.
Set it on yourself or even on a group of students, especially if you're working on that student-teacher relationship piece. Put it on a group of kids, the ones that, you know, you feel like will be good indicators of how the lesson is going, and watch them. Watch their reactions, watch their body language, watch what their conversations are about, watch how they are engaged in the activity. All that kind of information, you'll be surprised at how rich and valuable it can be.
And the biggest thing that you'll learn from that is that nobody's perfect. Even the teacher that's been doing it, even the big gurus that write the books and do everything, no one's perfect. And so I think as a teacher, that's really hard because you just think everyone next to you is doing like such a better job and they're doing it so well. So to go out and go into some of those classrooms and see that people struggle with sometimes the same things you do or other things, it helps you build that community of, you know, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses and figuring out how to help each other grow and get better. And we do have some great classroom videos on STEMcoach.com. So if you can't get in there to do observations or you're not comfortable with videoing yourself quite yet, there's easy ways, you know, 5-10 minute clips. You can learn a lot by just watching another teacher in action, even if it's someone that you don't even know.
Very good. So we're going to do one more check with Twitter and Facebook
Awesome.
and see what questions you guys have for us. So those are awesome. We really appreciate you guys chiming in with your questions. So there is one here from Lisa, and she says, how do we encourage more girls to become interested in science? The opportunities for women in the science engineering fields are wide open.
Absolutely. But I do think that part of having that good student-teacher relationship helps you talk to kids about that. I mean, I know my middle school kids, they were nowhere even near thinking about, college, and you mention it or you bring up what they're going to do, and when they grow up, they want to be a BMX biker or a professional basketball star. So having that relationship with them to say things like, I see this in you. I see the potential that you could go and do these great things, to be able to encourage those kids. And I really think it's important that when we do our classroom instruction that we try to bring in some of those fields. I mean, I know that I've learned now about jobs that I would have no clue even existed in the real world. I mean, I knew what was around me, what my dad was, what my mom was, what my friends' parents were, but there's so many jobs out there that they don't know about. So exposing them, to those different things that they could do, and then just, playing off their strengths and helping kids find a path that's a good path for them.
Well, help them find the science that they're already doing.
True, yeah.
Some of these kids are into music. That's
oh
a
yeah,
science.
that's totally.
That's a science. Some of these kids are into like the videography and stuff. That's a science. So help them find the science that they're already doing, and then capitalize on that. Encourage them to take it a step further. And another thing too is we have also on STEMcoach.com lots of resources about 21st century careers, and those are all science-related careers, but not the ones you would typically think of. Okay, yeah, the typical ones are there, like archaeologist and doctor, I think is there. But there's some cool stuff on there too that maybe is a little bit more outside the box that might cultivate somebody's interests.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we had another one, and I just lost it, but I'm going to pull it up. This is from Miss Arch.
Okay.
And she wanted to know, this is a big one, because I don't know if I can narrow it down.
Okay.
What was the single best thing you ever did to shift your teaching practice?
Okay.
That's hard.
It is really hard. I'm going to go back to watching other teachers.
Agree.
I'm going to go back to that. I think it helps you focus your attention on the areas that need improvement. And, I think as teachers, at least in my experience, we do build each other up. We tend to tell each other, that was a really good thing, I really liked that. And so if you are not watching yourself or other teachers on a consistent basis, then it may become more difficult for you to have a realistic idea of what's going on in your own classroom. And maybe that sounds a little harsh, I don't know.
No, I agree.
But I really do feel like getting outside of yourself and being honest and thinking about, these are the things I saw and these are the things I want to change and these are the steps I'm going to take to get there. I think that is the one thing. If I could just pick one, that would be the one I would pick.
No, I agree. That's very important. That's very important. And having that group of teachers who you feel okay with getting that feedback that might be a little bit, I don't want to say negative, that's not the right word, but more, trying to help you shape and get better.
Yeah.
Constructive feedback is really important, and having that group that you feel and you trust, and that they don't think you're a horrible teacher because they tell you that, the way you talked to that kid was a little harsh. I think that's a really important thing too. I would say for mine, it was seeking out professional development, just that mindset of I always wanted to learn, and having that thought that I know I could always be better. Like I know there's a huge part of me that wants to go back because I know I did not leave being the best teacher that I could be. I know there's so much that I could have done and done better. Even if I was at a PD session that I'd heard multiple times or wasn't anything new to me, I'd always try to find 2 or 3 things that I could try to work on and try to bring back to my classroom.
And from there, be realistic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Don't pick 20 things and try to change in a year.
I can remember starting the school year with a laundry list of things I was going to do better, and I had the very best intentions. But when reality hits, choose 1 or 2 or 3 at the most, that you really want to concentrate hard on for a semester, 6 weeks, a semester, whatever. But take baby steps.
And use others. Like if you have an instructional coach on your campus, that's what they're there to do. And trust me, it's so much easier to coach somebody when it's something that they want to work on. That's like a coach's dream, is to have a teacher come and say, hey, I really want to work on my positive to negative interactions with a kid. It's a lot harder to have to go in and try to convince a teacher they need to work on something. And if you don't have a coach, get that cohort of teachers. It doesn't even have to be other science teachers. It can be teachers of other disciplines, but a group you feel comfortable and safe with, and have those conversations and pick a couple things and try to change.
Go from there.
Okay, so now it's time for the grand prize giveaway.
Oh my goodness.
So the 10 people that have kind of been flashing up throughout our whole STEM talk are all in this little elf hat, and we are going to enter them in to win $100. And it is December 15th, the holiday season, so money comes in handy.
Everybody wants this.
Everybody wants this.
Okay, I have one in my hand.
I want it. Does it say me?
Uh-oh, I have two.
Oh no!
That was not good.
That's not good.
Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, I cannot get this thing. And the winner is Chad Haskins. Yay!
Hope you're watching, Chad. We will get in touch with you about how to get your $100.
Yes, thank you so much. So, y'all, we have had the best time tonight reliving some of our memories of being in the classroom.
I didn't cry. Usually I cry when I talk about leaving the classroom, so I did well, no tears.
Truth be told, we really do miss it. We just have so much respect for teachers that are still there in the trenches. The two of us, we talk all the time about the kids that we taught and, the people that we got to interact with, the other teachers, the administrators. Being in education really is one of life's greatest pleasures for me.
There's nothing like it. Nothing like being in the classroom.
Yeah, and science education.
Now I am going to cry now too.
No cries, no cries. This is all happy memories. And, we just want to say thanks to all of our teachers who are out there doing the hard work every day.
Absolutely.
We're pulling for you.
And those teachers who did help and shape us, because we would not have gotten to where we were without having those teachers to plan with and bounce ideas off of, and to be honest with us, because I think we had a pretty good group of teachers that would, they call us out on some things sometimes.
As much as it hurt to get marked down on that rubric sometimes, those are the moments that shape you as an educator.
Absolutely.
When somebody else sees a weakness in you, you go, okay, yeah, I'm going to work on that. So, guys, be sure to tune in for our next STEM Talk, which is going to be January 5th at 5:30 p.m. Laura and Bonnie will be here, and they will be doing a fabulous job, as always.
Oh, absolutely. And stay tuned for our next edition of Confessions of a Classroom Teacher. Next up is curriculum development.
Okay,
and Lordy will have tons of stuff to confess.
We will have lots to confess, for sure. So thanks again, everyone. We want to wish you a very happy holiday season.
Absolutely. Good night.
Good night.